Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was January 30th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcora Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. When I'm trying to do the initial sourcing for a document, I'm looking at the very beginning to figure out who it's addressed to, and also the very end to figure out who, when was it sent. And right off the bat with this document, I got stuck because it begins with a word that I actually have not seen before in my work with these documents, even the Latin ones, and this one is a Latin one. So the first word, the letters are clear, H-E-N-D-U-M, and then there's the macron, the abbreviation mark over the first half of the word, that horizontal line that indicates there is at least one letter that is omitted in order to save space, make the writing faster. And when I see that horizontal line, I think that it's most likely an M. Most of the time it's the letter M or the letter N, although occasionally it's used for a combination of letters like IS. But all of those possibilities just didn't seem to fit with this word, and I was stumped. So I went to ChatGPT, and indeed, it immediately got it, because I also put in the following three words, which are pretty clear. Gubernandum et defense... Defendendum. So this turns out to be a phrase that is actually quite frequently used in chancery records, and it basically means to have, to govern, and to defend. And it seems like this is in the gerundive, so it would be the ing ending for translating into English, something like having, governing, and defending. But this doesn't exactly make sense in terms of figuring out, well, what then would be the subject of the sentence? Is that the subject of the sentence? Where does the sentence end? I don't know. But I can cobble together a general sense of what's going on in this document. This document is a receipt of a sale, and I think that the money has been received by Violant's treasurer, someone by the name of Alatsario Goloff. And this, so taking a step back, where is this document? This is in one of Violant's registers. It's in a register labeled Varia, which means that there's actually some different seal levels here within the same register, I think. This particular folio has two letters on it. They're both in the public level, the less restricted level of seal. It's the sigillo essueto or essueco. Gosh, I'm still figuring out which one of those that is. All right, so we've got some kind of sale happening. It's very clear that money is being transferred. In the fourth line, we've got 3 words that clearly indicate there's some kind of sale going on. There's venditionibus, alienationibus, and at the very end of the line, apocam, which is the word for a receipt of a sale. And then the third line from the bottom, there's the word recaperitis right before Alazzario Golaf Tesoria Nostrum. So this is Violant's treasurer who has received some money. She's sending a letter, I think, to indicate that the funds have been received. The town that's mentioned in the second line, and I can tell it's a place name because that M is capitalized. So here's another instance where the paleography was a challenge for me. The word that I thought I was reading at my first glance was Maresina, and we have a situation where it's difficult to interpret the minims. The minims. Minim is a term in paleography for when there's short vertical strokes. And a lot of times there can just be a whole row of short vertical strokes, and you have to figure out, oh goodness, is this a U or is it an N followed by an I, or is it an M, or are there 2 N's? It's stressful. And now we have one of my cats here who is vocalizing a little bit of the stress of interpreting minims. So I thought this said Maresina, and I did a little researching trying to find a place called Maresina. I could not. And so, again, AI helped. It really did. No, it was helpful. I know we grumble when we admit that the AI really is useful, but it was. And so I found out as soon as I just plugged it into ChatGPT, it said, I'm looking at a place name, it looks like Maresina. It returned with a likely interpretation of Maresme. So in Catalan, the last letter is E, and the Latin rendering of it in this document has the last letter as A, and what comes before the A is the letter M, which I had interpreted as an IN. Maresme is actually a province, something like a region, a small region that's to the northeast of Barcelona along the coast. Some kind of land sale happened in this region, and the funds have been received by Violant's treasurer. I think that's the meaning of this document. And it could be that there's something else going on here, but I think that there's some phrases such as libere gubernare, like to be free to govern. So I think what's happened here is that people in Maresme, they have decided to pay to govern themselves. And what this indicates, I think, is that there's the selling of some royal land. So this is something that Joan and Violant took a lot of heat for, both from their contemporaries and also for later historians, from modern historians, because when you sell off royal land, you're also selling off the income that comes from the rent of those lands. So you're getting a short term gain at a long term loss. So this could be a document that fits within that pattern. I don't know that they started off doing that so soon, but by the end of their reign, they're doing it a lot because they're big spenders and they are more interested in funding their current projects, all of the troubadours and poetry contests and all kinds of things that they get going on in the later part of their reign, especially. But yesterday's document was all about Joan trying to get famous minstrels to come to the Crown of Aragon and to his court in particular. And so I think they're already looking at the financial aspect of the culture that they want to patronize, and they're starting to think about, all right, well, where are we going to get money right away to pay for all of this exciting stuff now that we have access to the royal coffers. I did a little bit of research on Maresme and tried to find some articles or publications that might have looked at this moment in 1387 when it appears that a group of people in this region paid money in order to take back the governance of the land, and I couldn't find anything about this, even though there is a monograph by Montserrat Richaud y Limona. And I'll put a link to that monograph in the bibliography for today's episode. So, a bit of a mystery. Also, one last thing to discuss is the existence of a financial transaction in the registers of letters. So what I have seen in some couple other examples is the letter getting sent to the person involved in the financial transaction confirming that payment was made. We actually saw that in an earlier episode with, I think, Shoan, and sending, like, confirming that the money had been received, by the treasurer. And so there's the letter in the register that gets sent saying, okay, got the money, or sending the money. And then there's also the record in the books of the treasury, the Patrimonio Real, in which there's an authorization to disperse the funds. And we've looked at a couple of those records. An early episode, we looked at a payment to a baker in Violant's household, and then more recently we looked at a payment to the husband and wife minstrel team, the Portelberts. So there's a number of places where you can find records of money moving, and the function of the document can be very different. So in the treasury records, it's initiating the payment process. It's releasing the money. There's going to be coins that are taken out of the treasury and given to somebody, or if it's a larger amount, it could simply be a paper transaction, because there definitely was money of account at this time, meaning that the accounts would be reconciled and handled through payment intermediaries like banks, or notes of credit would simply be passed along. And so there's large financial transactions that happen quite frequently where there's no coinage at this time. So in that sense, the economy is very financialized. So keep in mind as we're looking at documents like these that there's probably a related entry in a Patrimonio Real account book for the receipt of the money from whoever. There's no names of the people of Maresme in this document, at least that I could locate. I tried to find names other than at the end, Violant's treasurer. So it's interesting. There's definitely mysteries here, and I have a feeling that it's related to raising money for spending on troubadours and other cool stuff that Joan and Violant are excited to get going as they start their reign. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Multicara Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I have done my job. Because remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear more about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. And who knows, maybe you'll get more cat noises in the background. It's been a little frustrating today. All right. In the meantime, take care.